Welcome back to another episode of Everything Grows. I'm Faith Pickney, and I'm so happy that you're here. It's another week, another episode of Everything Grows. It's officially fall. I mean, it's been officially fall for like a couple weeks now, but I feel like mid October has always been my favorite time of the year because everything just feels so comfortable, and I'm able to sit back and watch Halloween Town and all these other things. No, I am not a person who's into horror. Don't ever ask me to watch horror movies. I believe those things stick with you, and I'm a scaredy cat. I am indeed a scaredy cat. So, although Netflix has been releasing lots of content related to serial killers, which is beyond scary, and I just think we need to really just move on from serial killers for a bit. It's becoming a little bit obsessive. Can we please move on? And yeah, so overall, I think that'll explain the topic of today's episode. Today's episode is about me growing up an HSP or a highly sensitive person. And I want to read off of verywellmind.com because they give a very great definition of what a highly sensitive person is. So, a highly sensitive person is someone who is thought to have an increased or deeper central nervous system sensitivity to physical, emotional, or social stimuli. So, people who are HSPs or highly sensitive persons, we tend to be like really nervous when it comes to everything. We're overwhelmed in shorter amounts of time, and we kind of care a little deeper about things more than we probably should. Verywellmind.com also refers to HSPs as having sensory processing sensitivity or SPS. So I can totally relate with highly sensitive persons. I mean, it's something that I've dealt with my whole entire life. I've talked about having social anxiety, but I think the umbrella term that'll kind of encapsulate all the struggles that I've gone through really does come back to being a highly sensitive person. Ever since I was little, I just always wondered why I was so sensitive and would cry so much when I'd come home. And I'm actually going to insert a little conversation I had with my mom. She just talks about how often I would cry and all these other things and my improvements. So let me just insert that right now. I'll cry.
Yes, you would cry.
And how often was I crying?
Just about every day.
So I was right.
Yes, very sensitive. Even in middle school, some people decided that they didn't want to be your friend, or maybe you felt that they were ganging up on you and that bothered you, and you would be upset about that and you would cry about it. In high school, you were a little sensitive there, but then you were sort of growing out of it. Very sensitive. And I've always said you need to be bold. You have to learn how to set your precedence, showing them that you are bold. People can say what they want to say as long as you know that you are not what they're saying. You've gotten way better with your sensitivity since you're older. I feel that now you're not letting things bother you as much as you used to let things bother you. You have a more spirit of boldness now, which is great, which is good.
She knew she was being recorded, by the way. But yeah, that's my mom. If you listen to her, then you'd know that she has an idea, a strong idea of who she is, and she's not going to take mess from anybody. And she always just wanted me to know my worth. She wanted me to know that no one could ever take away the light that was inside of me. But being an HSP, it did make it difficult to see things the way she saw things. Highly sensitive people, the way they see the world is through a completely different lens. You can be an HSP and you can have the same glasses as somebody else who's not an HSP, yet you both are going to see different things because you are seeing things a little bit more deeper than they are. So it just goes to show you that the way we see the world and the way art makes us feel is on a completely different level. It's quite relieving to know that there is a lot more research going into highly sensitive persons, but the term hasn't been around for that long. It's been around for not even 30 years yet, but it was coined by psychologists Elaine Aron and Arthur Aron in the mid 1990s. And Elaine Aron, she actually wrote a book called The Highly Sensitive Person in 1996, and I've never read it, but The older I get and the more I'm, asking myself deeper questions about who I am, why I am the way I am interested in reading this book just to get a better idea of what it's like from a psychological standpoint. Being a highly sensitive person, it definitely comes with a lot of different things, characteristics. It is a personality trait. Most of the traits include avoiding violent movies or TV shows, being deeply moved by beauty, being overwhelmed by sensory stimuli, feeling a need for downtime, and having a rich and complex inner life. And by the way, all of the information that I'm going to be telling you guys today, that is from verywellmind.com. You can research them and kind of get a better idea of what a highly sensitive person is for yourselves. Elaine Aaron also states that this trait is normal. So it affects 15 to 20% of the population. So that's like too much to be considered a disorder, but it is one that is very well misunderstood amongst majority of those around us. And it's pretty much innate, and like I said before, you are more aware of the little things, the subtleties, and you do become overwhelmed. This is going to be something that I think people are going to start discussing more because there's many of us maybe reaching our mid 20s and 30s who are just now finding out a lot of things about ourselves. And I just want to say that being a highly sensitive person, though it can have some negative aspects, I think it is a blessing in disguise, in my opinion, because the way I'm able to feel for people is really a human quality that everybody should have. Not saying that I have a better quality than the rest of the human race, but more so that me feeling these things makes it easier for me to see people as human. But on the other side of that, being a highly sensitive person also means that I feel things like 10 times as that of a non HSP person. So I tend to feel things deeper, and that means, a little bit intense feelings. Maybe if there's a breakup or something like that, I may tend to feel more crushed than the average person. Who knows? I just want to get into some moments in my life where my highly sensitive trait showed the most. I was thinking to myself, like, what instances can I think of, like, off the top of my head, where I knew for a fact I was a sensitive person? And I just think about being a child and being yelled at. And I think all of us somehow we don't like being yelled at. We find it very disrespectful, especially if the person can have a better way of saying it. I'm not perfect. Of course, I've yelled at people, and of course I feel horrible about it. But when you're a child and an adult yells at you, but they don't actually explain why they're talking that way, or the situation in which they're reacting to isn't one that will warrant that much anger. That's, as a child, you're kind of confused with why adults would do that. Like, why are they mad about this thing that I wouldn't be mad about today, you know what I mean? And it could be something so small, but it just goes to show you that being a sensitive person, being a sensitive child, I was absorbing everything around me. And most of the time, I was absorbing the attitudes of those in authority. So I was sensed when someone had a really bad attitude, and I was just really afraid of disappointing anyone. In school, I feel that discipline is important, but to instill fear in kids to where they can't even ask you to go to the bathroom with this fear of being yelled, that's not how it should be. In these school settings, there should be somewhat of comfort in knowing that if you need to go to the restroom, you need to go to the restroom. There are certain instances today, me at 24 years old, where I have a moment that just brings me back to where I was at like 5, 6, 7 years old. And a lot of that does have to do with adults and how they spoke to me. My mom, she did say that a lot of the times I would come home crying, primarily about friends, but there were times where I would just come home and cry because a teacher spoke to me in a funny way and it didn't sit right with me, especially when I was trying to be a really good student. Highly sensitive people, we tend to try to prevent things from happening. And you can sort of think of it as someone with social anxiety, right? The traits sort of tie in together. But yeah, I mean, for me, I would at least try to figure out ways to not make this person angry. And it's really sad that most of us are having to walk on eggshells with people who can't manage their own emotions, who really have the opportunity to regulate their emotions and just aren't. I shouldn't have to walk on eggshells with you for fear of being yelled at or attacked. Like, that's just not right. Now, at 24, I think I am more bold because I realized somebody yelling at me does not mean I did something wrong. It just meant that they didn't really have the right way of expressing their emotions. And that's why when people talk to me funny, especially if I like really didn't do anything wrong to them, I'm always telling them to watch their tone. And people today think that their tone doesn't matter, but it does. The message is very important, of course, but the way you speak to people is going to matter more than the message itself. So if you're telling somebody, "Hey, can you please pick this up off the floor?" Or, "Hey, excuse me," maybe you could say it in a more kind way, like, "Hey, excuse me," or don't say, "Please move out the way," like, move, like, don't do that. People are going to react and it can lead to issues. I'm very much aware of how I speak to people. Honestly, there is no need to be rude if you don't have to. The struggles that we go through as kids really just teaches us how to conduct ourselves as adults when we have children. So whenever I have kids, I really just want to make sure that I'm not invalidating them because I feel that based off of what I've been through in my childhood, I was invalidated a lot of the times because I was quote unquote too sensitive. But I feel that it's important to not shame anyone who may just be a little different than us and processing emotions a little bit different than us. I think it's really realistic for all of us to be different, honestly. And some people may be a little bit more hyper, a little more anxious than others, but it doesn't mean that you invalidate how they feel. Everyone's configured differently, and we have to respect that. And when it comes to children, we have to let kids feel those emotions. And I think it's really important that we don't tell kids to suck it up and stop crying. No, because that right there just lets the child know that their emotions, like their feelings, don't matter and really that their voice doesn't matter. And it's so important to uplift children and let them know they have the power to speak up if they feel uncomfortable about something. That's very important. You have a voice. Please don't be afraid to come talk to me about some things you're struggling with. And please let me know if you don't like the way I talk to you. Because sometimes adults, we don't realize how our tone comes off to people and how it comes off to kids. And I think it's really healthy that kids tell their parent like, "Hey, you kind of hurt my feelings the way you said that or said this." And it'll just really create this really healthy communication between the parent and the child. Old school ways of thinking will be like, that's ridiculous. Filling up the gap and the miscommunication that's sort of rampant in our generation and our parents' generations, the communication and lack of respect for kids, for people's children was really prevalent. And I just think that us kind of reversing that will really help kids in a lot of ways. Lately, I've just been seeing life differently than what I saw as a teenager. And I embrace the deep feelings that I have about life and the beauty of it, the way I express myself in art, in my spirit. It's really something that I am very passionate about. But the way I see art, it moves me more. If you follow me on my personal page on Instagram at Faith P. Marie, I am into aesthetics in the sense that I use that as a way to express myself and express what I'm feeling. So everything that I post is more so of a feeling that I have. And when I was a teenager, I would just constantly post these very aesthetically pleasing pictures from Tumblr onto my profile, and I think that's why Tumblr is also such a special social media site. People are really able to express themselves, and it's been very creative, and people are just able to write blogs and share pictures. And I think Instagram is trying to be like that in a way. I do love seeing people that are just living simply just to live. rather than to impress. I've always just been so moved by art because it can look good, but if it makes you feel good, you've won. So that's sort of like how I see things, how I see beauty. It's deeper, and that's what I try to put back into the world is that, beauty is really more inner than outer. I want to get a little funny here because and I'm sure many people can relate. Some of us just really do not like violent or scary movies. And I'll be honest, moments where I'm not feeling too anxious or jittery, I may watch an action movie or something like that. It's just the suspense. I've been able to figure out exactly where I fall within the thriller genre. So it can't be like a horror thriller. I need something with substance, something that's more like psychological, more than like serial killer type stuff. Like, absolutely not. I'm not doing it. So when it comes to like these these action movies, even like documentaries and stuff, like I get really anxious. My nervous system's like, girl, like you need to stop watching that. And I do. Like I watched a preview of Jeffrey Dahmer. Oh my gosh. Like just the whole show, the whole depiction of what went on. I had to pray, y'all. I had to pray. I was like, I need to turn off the TV. I need to turn off my mind. Like that's how I felt. It just goes to show you that, highly sensitive people, we can't always handle those types of shows or movies. Like that's not what we can handle. When I was watching Pretty Little Liars, yes, that one show with I think we all can agree that A was very terrifying. And when I first started watching Pretty Little Liars as a teenager, I used to like have a hard time falling asleep because I was like, is A gonna like come kidnap me? But that's what I thought, y'all. Like that's how I thought. And it's so funny now because it's like, girl, it's a television show, about some girls and some missing friend, but I'm aware that there are certain content that just really will not speak to me, and I had to turn it off. Even on TikTok, when I'm scrolling on TikTok or Instagram, whatever it is, if it's a story of someone dying or if it's a story of a kidnapping or things like that, I have to turn it off because it's just gonna feed my anxiety. And it's not that I'm trying to fear. These are things that are happening in real life, and I'd rather just not read on it, so I don't. And that's why I kind of like don't read the news either because I don't want to see the negativity all day. I'm very much in control of the content that I consume and how it can affect me. We all have pet peeves, but I would say for me, one thing that I really, really can't stand is sound. And I realize that the older I get, the more I just hate loud noises, loud talking in general. It's not even that I'm hating. It's just y'all can like lower it down sometimes. But I'm of course sensitive to those things too. When it comes to light, not so much. But I would say sound, like airplanes, like I get really anxious if there's an airplane flying above. If it sounds like it's like a little too loud, I kind of like my heart starts racing and things like that. Don't worry, y'all. I'm praying about it. I'm just being honest about what it can be like for a highly sensitive person, especially when it comes to your nervous system, the way it just reacts to certain things. But I will say, I have a really great fight or flight mode, like for real, like fight or flight. I'm flying far, far away, and I will be quick, very much. I think a really great example of a highly sensitive person is 11 from Stranger Things. And I say that because her emotions, they fuel her rage. They fuel her power. And if you've noticed how her powers work, it's mostly coming from her emotion, her rage. So she kind of bottles up in all her anger, but she feels it a lot deeper. And that's why she's like screaming when she's releasing this power. And I think she's just a really great example of a really sensitive person. If you haven't seen Stranger Things, by the way, give it a watch. I think it's a really good show, but as far as like analyzing the character of Eleven, I recognize that hypersensitivity in her. And I can really kind of relate with her when she feels things a lot deeper, whether it was like a breakup or just having issues with Hopper. Hopper is going to be like her adoptive dad. You really just get to see her feel those emotions. And even in like the latest season, you really get to see her feel. She really does try to do the right thing and save everyone the best she can. And I can really sympathize with her. Highly sensitive people also needed time to recharge. It's similar to that of introverts. And I think the reason why people don't understand introverts as much is because they don't realize that it's also like a physical aspect to not wanting to go out. I know that I have to prepare myself to go out and socialize. It takes a lot for me to do it anyway. If I've had a long day, like a really really long day, then I'm not going to want to socialize. And that's mostly just because I don't have the energy. I feel fatigued, and most times I just want to go home. And I think it's pretty valid to skip out on plans, especially if it's like not really anything that was set in stone anyway. It's good to just like put yourself first sometimes and like go home and rest and recharge. Introverts, when we socialize, it's only a matter of time before we're just like done completely. And that's not much of a preference. That's just how we are physically. Like, that's how it's not something that we want people to take offense to. That's why I think it's important for introverts and for highly sensitive people, everybody, to just know what you're capable of handling. Like, know what you're able to handle and do that. So if I know I have to go to a party for 6 o'clock, I'm already planning what time I'll leave. And I'm also planning bringing somebody if I can. I don't always like going places where I don't know people. So I'm always just thinking about the best thing for myself mentally, physically, because I'll get a little nervous sometimes, but that's why it's best to prepare in advance. If I were invited to a party and I maybe built up the energy to go, I'd be planning on when I leave. And I actually like plan out the whole party. I'd plan out how I'd move through the whole party. So I'd, say hi to people, socialize, eat, do all these things. And then 30 minutes before it's time to leave, I'm like wrapping up and telling people my goodbyes. So that's the way I had to do things, and that's just to bring about structure to my life and my sanity, because if I don't structure things out with parties, then I'm never going to leave the party. I'm going to struggle. So I have to know when it's time to start saying goodbye to people, and I'm out the door. Finally, I would like to talk about how highly sensitive people, we have like this complex inner life, and this sort of goes back to how I talked about feeling things a lot deeper than most people. There's all these opinions on the internet. I think the reason why I've always questioned the certain viewpoints on the internet is because you have to remain curious. You have to ask yourself those questions like, is this really something that young people need to be listening to right now? Like, is this person even like a good role model? I think about all those things, and you have to. But not everybody thinks like that. Not everybody thinks how certain trends will affect them. But I know how I was when I was younger. I knew how I was when I was like 15 years old, going through social media, wondering like, why can't I look like this person or this person? I used to have those thoughts all the time. Still struggle sometimes, but at least I'm aware and I'm able to move accordingly with myself and what I need to do, whether that's taking a break or just changing the way I use social media in general. And it doesn't even have to be social media for me. I think it's more so just the media I consume, the viewpoints I consume, the negativity I consume. So I'm constantly in deep thought about everything I'm looking at, because it will have an effect on how I feel about myself. And I want to make sure that I'm staying true to who I am and not morphing myself into this character that the internet wants me to be, or that the internet is projecting onto young people right now. I saw this video of this girl just talking about how people don't actually know who they are anymore because they're letting these characters and personas determine how they need to be. They're not really seeing themselves as who they actually are. So that made me think about how, it's just really important to separate yourself from your phone, from these little social media things like that. And I talk about that a lot because that is really primarily what our generation communicates through. And that's why I just try to have a better understanding of what I'm consuming, mostly for the betterment of myself, but also so that I can somewhere down the line help somebody else. And there are moments where things do get a little difficult for me because those deep thoughts, they can lead to intrusive thoughts and they can lead to just this overall negative self-image that I have of myself. And that's why I just make sure to take a step back from whatever is causing me to have these intrusive thoughts. I analyze everything that I've done, for the past couple of weeks and try to figure out what exactly is causing this. And I try to work with that. I pray a lot, honestly, because my mind is really, I'll say it, my mind is one of the sensitive parts of who I am. And I try to make sure that whatever is going in, if it's not going to benefit me, if it's not going to help me grow, then I need to get it out of there. So I'm praying a lot. I'm paying attention to the types of people I surround myself with. But I'm also making sure that I'm productive in my life, that I'm doing something that can really help me have healthy deep thoughts, not so much negative deep thoughts, you know what I mean? And have better, healthy, stronger feelings about things. But that's really what, being a highly sensitive person is. You can always find more information on HSPs. I mean, there's infographics on Instagram like everywhere. But this is my story. That is my take on growing up a highly sensitive person. I hope you guys were able to have a better and clearer understanding of what a highly sensitive person is and what life is like for a highly sensitive person. You can find more information. I mean, there's so much on Google, but Very Well Mind com has a very great article on what exactly a highly sensitive person is. And there's all these resources and things like that just to kind of help you understand. But the one thing that I take away from this episode is that it's important to know how to take care of yourself. Don't feel that you are weak for crying. Don't feel that you are weak for just, having these emotions. I think the best thing would be just have a healthy circle of people around you who really see you for you and really just want you to be the best version of yourself. But thank you all so, so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Everything Grows. Make sure to follow Everything Grows on Instagram at Everything Grows Podcast. You can also follow me on my personal page at Faith P. Marie. Make sure to come back next week for a brand new episode of Everything Grows. Always remember, everything grows in its own time. So take your time with life, and everything will be just fine. All right, bye everyone.